results are exactly the same. I mean, different is different and the same is the same. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. If you have different things going in, you're going to have different results. And so I wanted to talk about whether there actually are differences between different ethnic groups. And first of all, just genetically, are there differences? And the answer is, of course there are. Otherwise you couldn't tell. The fact that you can see that this guy's Chinese and that guy's black and that guy's Caucasian, and frankly, you know, often that guy looks Irish and that guy looks Jewish. Well, there's differences. Does it affect things other than appearance? Sure it does. Sure it does. Different diseases are more likely to affect different ethnic groups than other ethnic groups. Tay-Sachs is an almost exclusively Jewish disease. Sickle cell anemia is almost exclusively black. There's genetic differences. And by the way, one particular genetic difference modern day historians are starting to realize played a huge role in the history of slavery, and it is this. Before black slaves were imported to the United States, you know who they used as workers in the plantations in like South Carolina? Was indentured servants. They did some Indians too, but indentured servants were shipped over from Ireland and the poorer classes in Britain. And it raises a fascinating historical question, the kind of thing that smart historians wonder about, which is, why did they go with the blacks and not continue with the indentured servants? And you could say, well, they didn't have to pay the slaves, but they didn't pay the indentured servants. That's why they were indentured servants, okay? And they had to pay for the passage of the indentured servants, but you got to pay for the passage of the slaves. What do you think, the shipping lines took them over for free? Okay, you're going to pay for the passage either way. And the indentured servants from Britain, from England and Ireland, spoke English, had the same culture, and wanted to be there. They voluntarily chose to be there. The blacks, at least initially, did not speak a word of English, had a totally different culture, and didn't want to be there, you know, and were kicking and screaming the whole way. Well, which would you want on your plantation? If I said, you know, for basically the same deal, you can have people who speak your language, share your culture, and want to be there, or people who don't speak a word, they don't share your culture. Well, you know, that sounds like a no-brainer. Why did the black slavery happen? Malaria. The South Carolina at the time and Georgia too, was essentially a malarial swamp. It's still a swamp, but now it's just not malarial because we've got modern medicine. The average life expectancy of the indentured servants who were brought into work in the field in South Carolina was under 6 months. And from the plantation owner's perspective, I pay their passage to get 7 years of labor. If they drop dead in a couple of months, you know, I'm not getting my money's worth. Black people have way, way, way more resistance to malaria than white people do to this day. It may be the untold story of the whole history of slavery. But again,
and because malaria...
We're back to genetic difference again. Now, the reason nobody likes to talk about this is that it gets dangerously close to the ultimate issue that nobody wants to talk about. And that is, could there be an intelligence difference? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Could this affect the brain? Well, again, this is almost, you know, a no-brainer, pardon the pun. You know, if you're going to tell me that genetic differences, and by the way, the genetic differences are tiny. I want to be very clear here. Okay, teeny tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction of genetic differences. Okay, but they're there, and 50% of your DNA is exactly the same as the DNA of a banana. Okay, which will tell you how little difference there is between two different racial groups, but there's some. And could it affect intelligence? Well, to say that it affects every other organ in the body, but not the brain. The brain's exactly the same. Well, that's not science. That's wishful thinking. Okay? I can't believe that there aren't differences that affect the brain. But before everyone's head explodes, let me throw in two really important mitigating factors. First of all, Intelligence is not a unitary thing. It's very important to understand this. Intelligence is not one thing. There are many, many different kinds of intelligence. How many different kinds? I think there's a million different kinds of intelligence. There's intelligence in terms of your skill of dealing with other people and how you interrelate with other people. Some people are particularly creative, some people are particularly organized, some people are good with languages, some people are good with math and science. There's a million different kinds of intelligence. And everything, every human activity involves different types of intelligence. Sports involves intelligence. You got to think quick if you're going to be a successful, athlete. I know people who are really, really smart who have to think for 5 minutes before they say anything. You ever met people like that? Like you ask them, how you doing today? And they're like, they pause and take a deep breath, inhale from their pipe and blow some smoke in the air before they come up with a brilliant answer. But well, you're never going to make it as an athlete. If you have to think for 5 minutes before you figure out what you're going to do, maybe in baseball, but in most sports, you got to do it like right now is the thing. So there's a million different kinds of intelligence. So I totally reject the 19th century concept that this is the smart ethnic group and this is the dumb ethnic group and this is the in-between ethnic group. They used to chart these things like that, but that's assuming that there is a unitary thing which is intelligence. There are in fact a million different kinds of intelligence, and different people, I'm sure, have more strengths and more weaknesses in different ones, and it's fine. It's all fine. It's fine to be different. Again, diversity is one of those principles, because the left doesn't have principles, that they've thrown overboard, because they used to like it. But I actually am in favor of diversity. I think it is our differences that make us so strong. And which brings to one more point on this topic, which is, what about cultural differences? Of course there's cultural differences. Okay, if there's even a slightly different culture, you're going to have different propensities in different cultures, and that's fine. Are some cultures better than other cultures?
Yes.
Hell yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. Some of my left-wing friends like to say, don't you believe in evolution? When I say I don't believe in global warming, that's what they always say to me. They say, don't you believe in evolution? And it's like, yeah, I believe in evolution. There's way more kinds of evolution than you've even heard of. We assume that evolution is Darwin's theory of biological evolution. But you want to know something? There's cultural evolution. It happens all the time. Cultures that are more adaptable to the circumstance tend to overcome cultures that are less adaptable. And again, it's a very important note that there's no scientific test for this. Okay, you can't say, oh, that's an A-rated culture and that's only a C- culture. You can't scientifically do that. But in whatever the circumstance is, some cultures will predominate over other cultures, and we see this sometimes militarily. That Rome took over the world. One little city conquered pretty much the whole known world. Why? Because they were really organized and really good at projecting their power way beyond. They punched above their weight grade, military-wise. And even in a non-military situation, different aspects of different cultures, if they are appealing to other people, will spread, and others won't. It's the reason why there's probably 1,000 Chinese restaurants in this town, and probably 1,000 Mexican restaurants. How many Dutch restaurants are there? How many German restaurants are there? Well, a lot more non-Chinese like to eat Chinese food than non-Germans like to eat German food, okay? Whose fault is that? That's just the way that it worked out. But we see these cultural differences everywhere. And by the way, Thomas Sowell is a great resource on this. He's written several books that are very worth reading on the subject. And one of the things that Sowell points out is that during World War II, I'm sure you know that Eisenhower was of German extraction. Did you know that the majority of the American officer corps in World War II was of German extraction? Okay. Did you know that the majority of the French officer corps in World War II was of German extraction? The majority of the Russian officer corps in World War II was of German extraction. Germans have a kind of a military thing going there in their culture. They tend to predominate that. It's kind of like, Irish police officers. There's certain groups tend in certain directions, and it's fine. It's fine. It's not a problem. It's okay. But you're going to get different results.